G'day, it's Andy here from Aussie Homesteads. Fixing another Fisher & Paykel dryer at the moment. This one wasn't turning over, so you turn it on, nothing happens. So what causes that? Well, here's one with its drum in it. So what I've done is I've disconnected the drum, undone all the screws. First things first, always make sure it's unplugged. So 1, 2, yep, check. So now it's safe to take the back off. So you take all the screws off around the back, all the way around the perimeter, and undo the screws there and there. Disconnect all your wires down the bottom. You can colour code them if you like. Use a black pen and a red pen and a blue pen and a brown pen, and just colour code them all, and they'll end up looking a bit like that. Makes it easy to put them back together again. A lot of these things aren't polarity worried, so these are off of the thermal discs that go up here on the drum that cut the dryer out when it gets too hot. But we'll cover that in another video. This one's purely about the motor not running because it just won't start with a lot of wet washing in it. Doesn't have enough oomph to get going, so here's why. So up here is the idler. All that does is keep the tension on this belt here and makes the drum spin round. Alright, so the motor is in the back here. But I've ripped this part out here, and this one is now open. So what we can do now is, let me zoom out here a bit so you can get a better view. Okay, so now this one doesn't have its drum in it. So here's the same mode. This one's a dual idler. Some of them have one idler, some of them have two. There's the small motor in the back. The motor's connected to the fan. Fan spins round, distributes all the heat. These motors are fantastic, except for one problem. They need something to get them going, so under load they don't like to start. So that's the job of the capacitor. So what is a capacitor and how does it work? Well, this is the bad one, but we'll start with him. So see this little symbol here? It says 7.0, tiny little u and a tiny little f. That little u means micro. The F stands for farads. So this is a 7.0 microfarad capacitor, and that's what the capacitor looks like. Some of them have 2 terminals on the end, and some of them have 4. Some of them have this little clip on the end that goes into that hole right there. Right next to the motor is that square. So you just push that into there and it goes click and it stays in there, and you connect your wires. We're replacing it with this one. Just ordered it off of eBay. $9. Does exactly the same thing. It's got the 4 terminals on the end, and it's got a nut and bolt thread on it. So I can put that one in the hole, and there's a star washer which stops vibration, stops them undoing, because these things vibrate because they're dryers. So this little star washer digs into the metal and digs into the nut and stops it vibrating and falling off. And the biggest problem with these things is they fall off and then they become disconnected. Now, one thing to carefully note when you're replacing these things is these things hold a charge for about 10 or 15 minutes. How a capacitor works is it takes an electric charge and it passes it through the wires and into the motor, and it gives it this little jolt, and that little jolt is enough to kick-start the motor. Without that, it'll just go and it'll try to turn over. But these aren't very powerful motors. They don't need to be powerful. They're only turning over a 5 kilo load of washing. So what that capacitor does is comes from your controller into the capacitor, from the capacitor into the motor, and it goes vroom, and it kicks it over like that. And that's all that needs, is that little jolt to be able to get it going. And then your dryer, of course, will turn, because down here is where your belt connects to. Move that idler. That's where your belt goes on. Runs in that little groove down there on that thing. And then these 2 tensioners, they hold the tension on the belt exactly the same way as I showed you here. So that idler there is just spring loaded. All that does is keeps the tension at the right amount. And that spring there and that spring there is how you disconnect them. So see how it pivots on the idler? So that's what keeps your drum tight, keeps the belt tight to be able to turn the drum. So the next question, how do we know which way they go around? Well, they're not polarity worried, so they don't really care which way they go around. But the one thing you do have to worry about is, you'll see there's a divider running down the middle of them, a plastic divider, and it divides those to U-shaped. See how they're U-shaped? There's one terminal there, spin it around, one terminal there and one terminal there. That is one continuous terminal all the way around. So it doesn't matter whether you connect it to here, here on one side, or here on the other side. As long as you get one on this side and one on that side. Don't connect both of them to the same side because it doesn't work. So that's how you know where to connect them. If you like, and you can't, some of these, see, I'm working from the back of this one. Some of these, like this one, you can't see where you're working. It's in behind here. That's the hole for it. But this one's backwards. So you've got to do it, it's in here. So you can't see where you're putting these wires on. So what you can do is take these terminals here, and you can bend that one down and bend that one down so they're flat. Then you've only got two sticking up. So if I cover those two, see how you've only got two sticking up there. And when you're working blind, you can push it onto that one and push it onto that one, and you can do it by feel. You know darn well that you haven't got two on the same side. So Fisher & Paykel takes 7 microfarads, and if you're running a Westinghouse, Simpson, Whirlpool, Electrolux, they're all pretty much the same. They're actually 8 microfarads. And so Fisher & Paykel 7 or 8. And you can order them off the eBay for about $9.95 or $8 or $9. And you can get the clip-in type. I don't like the clip-in type. The clips on them break eventually. Then that no longer stays in that groove. It wants to fall out, and then all the wires disconnect. Dryer stops, and everybody goes, well, I'm just going to throw this $500 dryer out. Nope, get yourself a new one of them, shove it into there, put your nut and bolt on, use a spanner, tighten it up nice and tight, not over tight because it's only plastic, and that way you can push your plug back in if you've had plugged it. And now what that will do is, when you turn your dryer on, the power comes through here, goes bang, releases electricity, because it builds up in there and builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up, then bang, in a millionth of a second it releases the energy to the motor. The motor starts, and that's what gives it the oomph to be able to turn your dryer over. Now, just be very careful of these things. They hold a charge for about 10 or 15 minutes. So even when you have unplugged your dryer, that sucker's still holding a powerful jolt. So I've never actually been jolted from one yet, because by the time I finish stripping all the cabinet off the back and pulling all of the tumbler out, it's already 10 or 15 minutes and this thing's already discharged. But if you do want to discharge it, you can get a really big thick piece of wire and put the big thick bit of wire from one side to the other and touch the two together, and that'll discharge this capacitor. The ones inside microwaves are deadly. A lot of people pull microwaves apart and get electric shock because they don't realise the size of the capacitor. These are only 7 microfarads. They're very, very small. So there you go. How to fix a broken capacitor. Motor won't start on your dryer. Throw that in the bin. Get yourself a new one. $10 on eBay. And connect it all up. And away you go again. Hope it helps someone with their dryer. This is only capacitors. This is one of the other videos that I'm doing in the series. I'll get down to the thermal discs, and we'll start to go through in videos on all the different parts, including sensors, switches for the doors, timers, controllers, motors, idler pulleys, how they work, how they don't work, how to actually listen to the noise of the dryer and go, sounds like a bearing in the motor to me. Or if your dryer goes da-dum, 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 the dreaded train tracks they call that, that's a flat spot in your dryer. So your dryer drum sits in this groove here and it goes around in this groove. But if your dryer drum gets a flat spot on it because someone dropped the dryer off the back of a trailer or even just dropped it, putting it on the floor, your drum gets a flat spot on it, and it goes around and it hits that flat spot and goes da-dum. And then it goes round and it goes da-dum. So you hear that da-dum, 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 da-dum in your dryer. Anyway, we'll get to that. So this is just simply covering what the motor does. The motor just runs the belt, so it runs it on that little pulley there. So that pulley is right here. That's the same pulley right there. This one just has its fan taken off so that I can actually access it. I've taken the fan off this side. And this one goes through that, onto the idler. It goes round the drum. And that's what makes the drum turn. So all it is one big long continuous belt. And you can always tell where it's been running because there's a track mark on the drum. But anyway, that's the idler pulley. That's the motor, that's where the fan connects, that's the spring that holds the tension, but that'll be in a different video. This one, getting back to it, was all about capacitors. Hope that helps. Enjoy. Bye.